Hi, I'm Jason. This is kind of a walkthrough for my mock exam for the Air Force Officer Qualifying Test. So the afoqt is a very, very painful thing that you have to take when you're in the process of trying to commission to an officer of the United States Air Force. And there is some decent practice materials out there that I found. One I'll mention, just Crack ASVAB. They had a pretty good setup, and it was really useful up until I actually took the test. So I actually have taken the test. There is certain things you can do to get your scores better, as in the super score that they have. The Air Force allows you to take the test twice without any repercussions, and they will take the lowest scores you have and knock them off and keep your highest scores. So it becomes one giant, it's called the super score. So in that, I've seen the test. There is an NDA you sign. So I don't have any information that comes directly out of the test as far as their questions are concerned. All the questions that I have in this are kind of, they're AI generated. And it's basically just the topics. So the testing format is basically what you would have taken for maybe your finals in college or ACT, SAT type stuff. So it's not really going to be super complicated, but it's not going to be very easy either. My version of the test actually has some sections that are harder than the actual exam itself, some that are easier. But this, first and foremost, there's disclaimers. So this is not affiliated or endorsed by the Air Force, the Department of Defense, or any government agency at all. This is my own personal work. I made this as a way for me to practice. And as I was constructing it, it got to the point where I thought maybe I should just share this with others, so people can get an idea of how it feels to take this test. I'm not guaranteeing any passing score or acceptance to the Air Force. That is strictly on your recruiter and what's in your background or whatever you say in an interview or whatever. I don't know. I'm still in this process of recruitment at the moment. I'm actually kind of still early on. I have all my paperwork turned in, but the afoqt, I wanted to retake it, and we haven't scheduled that yet. As of this recording, I haven't taken it a second time. This is educational purposes only. There's accuracy, so some of the questions may be worded a little funny. They are generated by AI in certain cases. It's all AI. So mostly the reading comprehension section is going to be, that's all AI generated. I'm not sure how accurate the material is, but that's just to test your reading comprehension, your ability to actually understand what you read and then answer questions about it. This is also used at your own risk. So for official information, the Air Force has some information. There's a pamphlet that had a little bit of information on it that I found. There's not a whole lot of in-depth information on the test. I think they maybe want to keep it that way, but I don't know. There's people out there, there's a lot of websites I found that you have to pay to, get information and then practice for the exam. I don't think that's right, but that's why this is free to use. At the moment, it's on Cloudflare. Copyrights and usages, the code is mine and Claude helped build it. But it's in a private GitHub repo. This is being hosted on a different platform, though. But yeah, all that being said, read the disclaimer more in depth. That's legal. And then there's a recommended approach where you're going to take the full exam first and see where you stand. So if you've gone to Crack ASVAB or any other testing materials, this is going to actually give you the full 5 hour of experience. It is about the endurance, the pain of your brain melting inside your head, and you're not sure exactly how you feel during most of it. But there are 12 sections, starts with verbal analogies. The timings are the same. So this is taken from Pearson VUE, their website, and from what I can remember of actually how I felt while I was taking the test. So the way that it's set up, and there's information about this that I put here, there are 516 questions. There's 214 minutes plus breaks. And there's 12 sections. The biggest thing is treat this like the real exam, okay? So in the real test, when you're in that room, you can't get up. You are stuck in that chair for the first half of the exam. Now, there is a section right before self-description inventory. No, it's after section 7. Yeah. Oh, it was here. It's after self-description inventory. There is a 15-minute break. So all of this, the 829, all of these, you can't get up. You have to stay in your chair. You're not allowed to have anything to drink, nothing to eat, nothing. Now, in the real test, it's going to be like that. So if you're taking this, I recommend that you do that. Treat it as if it is a real exam. That way you get used to the feeling. This is a long time. Parts of it are going to seem a lot longer than others. But then after that, you have the last 5 sections. And the way the test is structured is these first sections, these first 5 are going to be if you're doing line officer. So if you're focused on a line officer, which is a non-rated job, you're going to pay attention to these most because that's going to be your composite scores that are going to help you with that. These last 5 are going to be more for your rated jobs, especially these. Table reading, instrument comprehension, block counting, and aviation information. This is for pilots, ABMs, people like that. So they need to pay close attention to these. These are going to play into that, but you need to know what you're doing and how to strategically pay attention to the test, what you need to study afterwards. I mean, I like the aviation information, all this stuff back here because when I was a kid, I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to fly fighters for the Air Force. So I can't do that. I'm a little old for the pilot's program now, but I still enjoyed learning it. So I learned a lot about helicopters just from practicing for this exam. But that being said, I'm going to edit a lot of this throughout because it's a lot of me clicking. I'm just going to click through the questions. You'll see what they look like, but I'm not going to go through every single question. It's a 5-hour exam. It's scheduled for 5 hours. The real exam, I finished mine in about 4 hours. But so this is verbal analogies. I'm not going to even select answers. I'm just going to show you the types of formats that you can see on it, where they'll have like colons and then you're making comparisons. And then, yeah, so I'm going to skip to the end of the section. You'll see it now. So you get to this last question and then it'll go submit. Now the breaks, you do have breaks that you sit and this happens in the real test too. There's a little timer that you're going to see and it gives you this time in between sections to basically do palate cleansers for your brain. So the way that the test is set up is words, math, and then words. So you have to take a break. You don't have to. You can just skip to the next section if you want to. But I sat in the room and just kind of just daydreamed. Just pretended I was on a beach, doing something else. Just chill out for a minute. Let my brain calm down. That way I can get ready for the next one. Because this next section, arithmetic reasoning, is 29 minutes. And 25 questions in 29 minutes seems like that's a lot of time. It's really not. Because when you're doing the math sections, you get a whiteboard. And mine was actually 3 pages of a whiteboard. But you can't erase anything. You also don't get a calculator. You have to do all of your math by hand. Because in reality, let's just say that you're in the middle of a battlefield, where you're not saying a battlefield, but in a forward area. And so you're trying to get something set up, but you have to do math. I mean, you can write it on the ground. Granted, you're probably actually going to carry a calculator in real life, but you lost your calculator, whatever. You need to know how to do that. So you have to do your math by hand. Anyway, so in arithmetic reasoning, it's got questions like this. They're word-based questions, primarily in arithmetic reasoning. So they're all going to be some form of asking you a question, not really equations. You're going to have to figure out the equation in your own head and then figure out how to calculate the equation. I'm going to skip through this section. Then the way it's timed out is I timed it out as anything that's above 20 minutes is going to have a 10-minute break. Now, this happens on the real exam too. There's 10 minutes in between certain sections that are larger than others. The little 5-10-minute sections, they don't give you 10 minutes. You get 5 minutes. But this one has 10 minutes because it was a 29-minute section. So I'm going to move on to word knowledge. That's 5 minutes. And this is basically trying to figure out what definitions are, what the words mean. And you get certain setups to where most nearly means, it'll say that. And then you get these bold-faced words that'll what is the particular one, what's it closest to. And you can see the timer up here running. So I'm going to skip through this. As far as the timers are concerned, I didn't mention that earlier. The timers will keep running. There is a clock that is running constantly, and it is timing you. So all of these in here, these timers will run out. When they hit 0, it goes to the next section. It says right here, break will automatically end when the timer reaches 0. The timers inside the sections are counting down. So when the timer ends, if you haven't finished all the questions, it will jump to the break. So that is the way it is set up, and that is the way it is in the real exam. So we're going to go math knowledge. And so these are actually kind of more equation-based. So if you know how to solve for certain things, it does have some word problems in there, but it's your type of calculations, how you're doing it. And they're a little bit more, I'd say to a degree abstract, but not entirely abstract. But I'm going to go through this. And we come to the next break, reading comprehension. So the reading comprehension section is, on a crack ASVAB they had, their setup was they had these 5-paragraph passages you would read, and you had 10 questions you had to answer. On the real exam, it's not like that. The real exam is going to be, it's basically short paragraphs maybe 2 paragraphs at most from the ones I got, and then you have like 1 or 2 questions, which to me is better for memory retention. So your short-term memory is actually going to be more active if you read a smaller amount. And the recommendation I've read in certain places that you need to read the questions first and then read the passage. That way that you know what you're looking for. For taking tests, that is kind of what you need to do. In real life, you wouldn't do that because you're just trying to discern information out of words. So you wouldn't have any questions. You'd ask the questions afterwards to make sure you comprehended it. But anyway, there's 35 minutes for 25 questions. The way that they're set up is, my version, they're not all going to have 2 questions apiece. Some of them actually have 5 questions. Some of them have 2 questions. Some of them have 1 question. Some of them have 3. I don't think I have any with 4, but yeah, so. And there's some really interesting information in here about this stuff too. Like I said, AI, Claude wrote this stuff, so it's really interesting. I learned some stuff while reading it. But yeah, so there's 3 questions in this one, 2 questions. And so, yeah, I'm going to skip through this, and it's that quick. So the next section is situational judgment. To me, this is probably the actual most important section for the exam. And I mean the real one. Because this part of the exam actually tells the people on the board that you would make a decent officer. How it is actually set up, and I'm just going to actually go into the section here because it gives you 35 minutes. There's plenty of time to talk about this. So inside, you get a scenario. So this is the scenario. You discover that your predecessor left the unit with several unresolved problems and poor documentation. So how this is based on what you would do in these situations. What would you do? Focus on moving forward without dwelling on past issues. Are you least likely to do this? Most likely to do this. This is a personality test, but it's gauging your management skills, or your management style, I should say, not your skills. Some of it will be skill-based, but a lot of it's going to be, I forgot the word I just used. Skill-based, personality types, traits, what you would do. And this tells the board members that are analyzing your packet, how is this person going to be as a commander? Are they going to be really hard, rigid? They're going to just kill morale? They're going to be mean to everybody? Are they going to be too lax? Are they going to be they're going to be complacent? They're not really going to care? They're looking for people that are going to be decent. And the way that this is scored, this section is not scored on the mock exam. My test I can't score this because the way that it's scored is it's basically like Family Feud. They asked a bunch of officers in the Air Force what they would do in these scenarios. And so if you answer close to what they would say, like, let's just say focus on moving forward without dwelling on past issues, if you're more likely to do this, and they asked, let's just say 100 officers, and they, like 90% of them said they're more likely to do this, you answered the same as 90% of officers that are actively doing their job, then they're going to look like, okay, yeah, they would work. But if you said you're least likely to do this, well, and you answered part of the, let's just say 5%, well, then you may not be looked on favorably. That's how it's actually scored on the real exam. So I can't know those answers. I just know that this is an extremely important part of the exam, and especially because you're going to be a commander. That's what you're doing, is you're an officer. So you'll answer these scenarios and these questions. I still don't have this one part fixed yet. It's actually supposed to say 80 up here, but I didn't push it to the GitHub repo yet. I want to record this first. But yeah, that's this section of the test. This isn't scored, and self-description inventory isn't scored. But I'm going to skip to the end of this, and then we got self-description inventory next. This section is a nightmare. Because if you've ever applied for a job, you've probably taken a test like this. It's a personality exam. So it basically has maybe 30 to 40 questions, but they're worded in 20 different ways. So it's checking for consistency, that you're actually paying attention to what you're actually clicking. So I need extensive information before deciding anything. Is it like me or not like me? Which are you more like? And this is gauging on your personality. But it will also make sure that you're paying attention, because that same question will probably come up but worded differently. So it won't say, I need extensive information. It'll say, I don't need extensive information. And so if you say it's not like me, well, then that's the same answer that you just put for the last one. If you say it's like me and you say they're both like me, well, then you're either lying or you forgot what you put or you're not paying attention. And that usually comes out in these answers. That's the reason why they do this like this, is because it tests to make sure you're paying attention. I'm not going to punish you with me clicking 240 times to get to the end of this because it does take a long time. So you'll just see me show up like right at maybe 240. Okay, the last question on this. This is where you go into the 15-minute break. Now, the 15-minute break in the real test, you are allowed to get up. You get up, go get a drink, go to the bathroom, do whatever you need to do. But you have 15 minutes. And then you go outside. At least for me, I had to go outside, tell the proctor that I was taking my break, and then I went and took my break. And I came back and I actually just talked to the proctor until she told me, she's like, oh, you need to get back in there, start finishing your test. So this is kind of a breakdown, the last 5 sections you're going to get. Now, like I said, if you're not doing a rated position or going for a rated officer, you probably don't need to pay too much attention to these. But if you're going for rated, you do need to pay attention to them. And some of them actually, I think physical science really does kind of count into some of the composites. So you kind of probably need to pay attention to some of them more than others. But some of these are going to be more difficult. But yeah, I'm going to go to physical science, and it's basically the same as the rest of them as far as question type. It's not, I mean, the science part of it isn't super hard, but it's not easy either. I think mine, for the questions I got, because you only get 20 questions, so I don't have their access to their question bank. On the test, the real one, mine didn't seem that hard, but the ones in this mock exam are slightly harder, at least from what I get, from what I have. I'll talk about the question banks later, but yeah, I'm going to go ahead and skip to the end of this. And table reading is next. Now we get into the interesting things, because this is where it really gets painful for certain people. I made this section deliberately harder. This is not as easy as it is on the real test. If you can pass this, the table reading in my exam, you'll do pretty good on the real one. Because what you're going to see on mine, this is not that bad. So you are determining, and you're probably going to have to get like right up to the screen to see it. You cannot use a straight edge. They say it in the real test. You cannot hold a straight edge up to the screen in order to actually do the table reading. So I used my mouse when I was in the real test. But yeah, so that is a smaller one. They do get bigger. And in some cases, see if I can find one that will go. Yeah, I got to fix this. I actually haven't pushed the code for that yet. But they get even bigger. So if you can pass mine, you can pass theirs. But that's specifically for the table reading section. I'm going to skip to the end of this. We'll go over there later. Oh yeah, just before I click the button, I also want to point out, you do only have about 7 minutes to finish the section. So it's going to be painful. Like I said, if you can beat mine, you can probably beat theirs. That's not a guarantee. I'm not guaranteeing that. I'm just saying it's a very high likelihood. If you can beat mine, you can beat theirs. So go to the break, and then next up is instrument comprehension. This is my most proudest part of this test. I'm extremely proud of this part because I made it. I mean, granted, Claude did all the coding for, getting the questions to look like questions, but I'm the one who made all the pictures. So in instrumentation comprehension, these instruments, you pay attention to the attitude indicator and the heading indicator, and you have to figure out which direction the plane is facing. I did all this in Blender. So I actually have, I made the entire indicator itself. This is actually 3 components that are kind of like sandwiched together, and the heading indicator is actually running off of there's a driver on it, running on it. I don't think I should explain that because probably no one cares. But if you do want to know how I did it, it's really cool because it's actually animated. It's 200 or 300 frames that are animated across it, and I just took the frames and then put them into the code. But so you'll just look at the heading indicator. I mean, honestly, strategically, you'll look at the heading indicator first, then you look at the attitude. Because if you're looking at the heading, well, the plane's going to go a certain way. And if you look at the heading, well, it's headed northeast at heading 340. So it's going to be one of these two. Now we look at the attitude. How's it looking? Well, it looks like it's diving slightly because this is the ground, this is the sky. So it's not climbing, it's diving. So we picked that one. And then this is you're looking directly at the sky. And you're facing, heading 60. So you're pointed up and heading that direction. It's pretty easy. This is probably one of the easiest sections of the test, at least to me it was. Granted, the time crunch is terrible on it. You have 25 questions and it's like 5 minutes. But you do get to the point, and theirs is, I think, more simplified. I just went a little bit bonkers with this one because I enjoyed it so much. I thought I had fun building it. So, yeah, I'm going to skip past this part. You can enjoy it later. And we get to the next section, which is block counting. Block counting is also another one of my favorite sections because, again, I had to use Blender to make it. The stuff that I got from Crack ASVAB, their block setups were kind of all over the place. They weren't really uniform. And what I found on the test is that they were more uniform. The difference between mine and the real one is they have like a little tiny picture they put up in the left corner of the screen. I didn't like that because it's really small and you have to get really close to the screen to see it. So mine's actually pretty big. So, but mine is harder. So in theirs, they'll have it look kind of like this maybe, to where you can see it's pretty definitive as far as the structures are concerned. On mine, they can be, you know, like solid structures, but they can also be difficult like this, where there's holes and there's things that are slid out of place. So you're going to get very difficult setups in this. I made mine, the block counting section, deliberately harder. This is harder. Your three-dimensional spatial awareness is going to be tested to the limits in certain cases, depending on the setup you get. Like this one, this would be a nightmare situation for anybody looking at this, because if you end up with one of the highlighted back here, it's going to be painful because you're not exactly sure. And you have a very short period of time to get 30 questions answered. So if you can beat mine, you could probably beat theirs. Probably, possibly, not guaranteed. I'm going to skip through this. Yeah, that one's painful. But I'm going to skip through this to the end. And we come to the final section, aviation information. This is, kind of self-explanatory. It's just stuff about aviation. It has topics such as helicopter controls, airplane controls, air traffic control, stuff like that. So if you've studied that, if you've been a pilot for any length of time, then you kind of know a lot of the information on this already. So I'll just skip to the end of this. Okay, so the very final question. After that, you will get a score sheet. Now this one, I didn't really answer anything, so everything says zeros. But, well, actually not everything. I got a 0.4%. I did take this earlier, and this is what I actually did. So this is legit me taking it. Except for reading comprehension, because I kind of know the answers to some of those questions already. But I did score an 88 on verbal analogies, an 88 on arithmetic reasoning, 88 on word knowledge, which those are all 88s, that's weird. But math knowledge, I scored an 84. So I do know for a fact that when I took my exam, my weak points are math, because I haven't done math like that in years. And my reading skills, I don't read stuff like that. I read mostly manuals, stuff for like coding and stuff like that. But down here, I just kind of randomly guessed when I was clicking, but you'll get stuff like this. So the difference in the text. So this is kind of telling you where you need to focus when you're practicing. But this doesn't save. I forgot to mention that at the beginning, but this does not save any of your testing information. I didn't want to use storage, no session storage, no database storage. I didn't want to use any of that. So if you want this, take a screenshot. That way you know where your weak points are. Screenshot this. These down here, they're kind of useful. That was Claude's idea to put them down there. But your overall accuracy is going to tell you what you scored on the whole thing. Like I said, in here for self-description, it doesn't score it. There's no score for that or situational judgment because, like I said, I can't score those. Those are personality based on totally different metrics. But the rest of them are scored. And it'll give you an overall percentage, and then you're done. So I'm going to use this one, and then you just go to the exit to the menu. And then we have practice mode. So practice mode is, I should have put, these are in here just for fun, if you want to go through and try to go to situational judgment. But this has all of them. And the question banks for these are the minimum of 200 questions. So there's a minimum of 200 questions per topic or per section. So you have a lot you can practice. And these are in 25s. So you come in here, and then the thing about at the end of this, mind the clicking, I just have to show this one part. I'll talk over it. So you do get the answers. So there are explanations on literally every question. That was one thing I did like about certain parts. I got that from Crack ASVAB. Certain sections actually, or certain questions did have answers and then explained why they are the way they are. Believe me, that helps on the math part. Because if you don't understand why an answer is the answer, well, then it's not going to help you learn it. So that's the reason why the explanations are here. It gives definitions for these words, and it does that on everything I could do. So, and that goes for arithmetic reasoning, word knowledge, all of them. But some of them, like I said, this has 400 questions in its question set. And some of these do get painful. And usually the same size. They're random. as well. The only section that's not random that I don't recommend actually using the practice mode for would be instrumentation comprehension or instrument comprehension, because the way that I had to do this, the randomizer works in full exam mode, but doesn't work in practice mode. I can't randomize these because it wouldn't make any sense. So, I mean, I may look into that, see if I can actually randomize certain parts of these sections. But if you watch the indicator, it doesn't, I mean, the planes change. The indicator doesn't change that much because it's just actually following the animation. Because I rotated on the x-axis, then I rotated on the y-axis, then I rotated on the z-axis, and then I just spun it around basically in a very predictable 360-degree rotation, and then I just took all the pictures and put them in the web app. So this just moves gradually over time, and you can just use the plane. So, I mean, if you do know what you're doing, it does help with, like, memorization if you want to, like, figure out which way the plane is facing. It does help, but I may look into this to see if I change it. If it looks different when you get a hold of it, it may look different to where I actually did but decided to randomize it in here, then it'll look like that. But that's kind of how this works. Your practice sections will be, like I said, a minimum of 200 questions. So you can use those. Block counting is one you can definitely use. And the block just changes places. And so the numbers do change. This may be the same shape and setup, but the block changes locations and the number of blocks it's touching will change on every single one. So every question is individual. But that's block counting. Is there any aviation information? That's just good learning. That's just good. Even if you're not training to be a pilot, it's still good knowledge to have. Subscription inventory, I don't know why that's in here. It's in here, but I mean, you can look at it. It's kind of, if you want to practice this, I don't really see, you shouldn't practice this, honestly, because this is on the test. So they're asking you, I mean, it's the mock exam, so it's not really going to matter. You can practice the setup. But the point of this whole thing is it gets you prepared for the feeling of taking that test, because it is a marathon. It is not something that is small. It's not something that is simple. It is mental and physical endurance, because this exam is scheduled for 5 hours, like I said. So you actually have to be able to sit there and stare at that screen and understand that you're going to be there for a long time. So if you're bad at taking tests, it's going to suck. If you're great at taking tests, it may still suck because you're not used to sitting down for 5 hours. But this is just to get you used to the feeling of it. As far as the questions are concerned, if it helps with the studying and you actually score, a more decent score on it because of some of the questions in here, cool. But that's not what it's for. It's just to help you understand what it feels like. Because when I was studying all the stuff for it, there was no timers, there was no question sets that were going to be specifically to what I was going to be going through. And so when I took the test, the feeling was completely different. And so I wanted to emulate that and then share that with everybody to let them know what it feels like. Because it's not fun. And like I said, this is not going to guarantee you anything as far as a score, as far as entrance in the Air Force. There are so many other factors that are involved in actually commissioning that this is kind of a smaller one. There's your medical, there's your background, there's all kinds of stuff. There's your interview itself with your either a colonel or lieutenant colonel. So that's just something that's going to go into it. You even have to build your packet. That's a huge thing too. If your packet looks like crap, well then the board's not going to look favorably on it. So this test is kind of just a small portion of it, but it can be a gatekeeper for some people. Like I've seen a person in Reddit that was getting 10s on their scores. My scores the first time I took the exam was 99 on pilot, 94 on CSO, 99 on ABM, and then I got like a 76. I think my lowest score was like a 67. And then I think it was a 74 on the other one. So not terrible scores, but not what I want. I want higher scores. And from stuff I've been reading, you need to be probably in the 80s to compete. But the way that the test is scored itself is it's not scored, that accuracy score, that doesn't matter. Because your score is going to be compared to other people that took the test that day. The score changes, your percentile will change depending on what day you took the test. Let's just say that there were 100 other candidates taking the test that day. You're compared against those other 99 people. Now, if it was a different day and 50 of them took the test, well, then you're compared to 49 other people. It changes from day to day. It's not the same. You're grouped in with whoever you're grouped in with, and then they assess that based off of that. So This accuracy score is just for you and you alone. It's not going to reflect what you can get on the test and what you're going to be compared to in the other people. Let's just say that you scored, let's say, 53%, but the rest of the 10 people that took the test that day all scored around 50-something%. Well, let's just say you're 53. They scored most of them, let's just say 8 of them scored 45 or around 45. You're in the upper level percentile. So you look great by comparison, even though you scored complete crap. But if you're compared, let's just say, to 100 people and their scores are mostly in the 70s and you scored a 53, you don't look so good now. So it changes, and you just have to be prepared for it. Like I said, it's going to be primarily your feeling on the test. If you don't feel okay, make sure you get plenty of sleep. Make sure you go to the bathroom before the test. Make sure you don't drink really anything before the test. That way you don't have to go to the bathroom during the test, because that can weigh on your mind too. But that feeling is going to dictate how well you do on the test. If you feel comfortable, if this helped you get comfortable with the feeling of taking the test, well, then that maybe help you think easier, give you a sense of ease while you're taking the test. But that's really all I have to say about that. I mean, I hope it's like Forrest Gump. But I hope this helps. At least if it helps, hell, if it just helps me, then I'm okay. But if it helps other people, then I'm happy about that too. But like I said, this is just me trying to help out others. Commissioning is not an easy process. It can take its toll on people, from what I've seen, especially the length of time it takes to actually do this. If you're not enlisted, because I'm a civilian trying to commission, so this process it can be lengthy, years even, and this is part of that process. But I hope it helps somebody. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, feel free to leave them below. Help each other out, because this is a group effort. And anybody who gets a commission, if I don't get it, I'm happy for you. And good luck. See you around.